So, what if I told you that time isn't what you think it is? Time is an illusion. We have been conditioned to believe in the clock, right? We have been conditioned to believe that time is linear. The past, the present, and the future, it all happens in a straight line, in a chronological order. We have been conditioned to believe that we're always losing time or that time is passing us by. This presentation is going to start to get into how you can manipulate time, how you can transcend time, therefore being able to manipulate reality, probably consciously create reality more than you could have with just a basic understanding of time. But also, we're going to get into time traveling. Time is not linear. Time is an illusion shaped by our consciousness. And by simply shifting our awareness, starting to notice how dimensions work, how we always operate in different dimensions simultaneously, we can transcend time. We can transcend our base understanding of how life works. We can, I think, start to access multiple timelines, and we can consciously influence our reality. First, we do have to talk about the scientific explanations of time and how they are clashing with each other. We don't actually know what the hell time is. But the one thing you gotta know is that time happening in a linear fashion, it's not even like that is so outdated. Like, we all live under a rock, unless you are into physics. So, Einstein's theory of relativity, he basically discovered that there is no now for everyone. Perception of time is based on how the observer of it is moving. It's called time dilation. Or time can be manipulated by gravity. Heavy objects cause time to slow. And what Einstein really did is he began to show that space and time are not separate things. That's where we get space time. And we're going to get into the dimensions a little bit later, but he denoted time as the fourth dimension. Now, a big part of Einstein's theory of relativity is the block universe theory. So he basically said that the past and the present and the future all exist at the same time, and that the future is already determined. So it's a term called literally determinism, that there is no free will. Things are already laid out for us. We have an illusion of making autonomous decisions. Now, at least Einstein's theory of relativity started to break the barriers of what we know as time, but it's incomplete. And on the other side of the spectrum is quantum mechanics. So while Einstein was looking at like the big parts of the universe or the big parts of existence like space, quantum mechanics looks at the very, very small, the building blocks of reality. It looks at reality at an atomic level. So what quantum mechanists, whatever, physicists observed is that an atom behaves differently based on if it is observed or not, and it can act as a wave or a fixed particle. This basically just allows for infinite possibilities to exist. So in quantum mechanics, it's not as smooth or as laid out or as predetermined as relativity. Now we get into some mind-shattering things in quantum mechanics like retrocausality. So if you've ever watched Interstellar, I believe that this is what they were showing in that. Interstellar was a movie that laid out how basically the future and the past influence each other. It also even got into relativity because it showed how time slows down when you go out into space. So we're starting to question what exactly cause and effect is. Retrocausality is the idea that events in the future can influence or even determine events in the past. So we're starting to just throw our original idea of time just completely out the window. And really, what are the impact of our decisions in every moment? It's like conscious choices that we make now could ripple backward as well as forward. And if retrocausality is a thing, then physicists say that helps to prop up the idea of quantum entanglement. So particles that were once connected or related to each other in some way can be separated. No matter where they end up being in the universe, they can instantaneously affect each other. And we know this is true to some extent. We know that we could be the whole way across the world from our family, someone important to us, and we can pick up on their emotions. We can feel that someone is going to call us, and then 10 minutes later, they call us. So, anyway, that's the quantum side of things. The thing is, though, relativity and quantum mechanics are incomplete. So, now what's trying to be done is to unify those two theories and to basically come up with a theory of everything. So, both of those theories only look at existence from 4 dimensions. When they are attempted to be unified, more dimensions are actually needed to do that. So basically, in the future, I think we are going to start to become aware of the many dimensions that we live in simultaneously. And that is the key to time travel. All right, so we're going to leave the dimensions for a second. We're going to come back to them. But first, we got to keep breaking this barrier of what we know as time. So we look at the clock. I don't actually know when the hell the clock was even created, but we know that there's something off there. We know as humans, we should probably be attuned to nature's clock, the damn sun. Now, a common thing we often say in our society is that, time is ticking. We're losing time. We're wasting time. We are wasting clock time, all right? We are appeasing the notion that time is always going forward, and it does appear that our bodies are subject to linear time in some regard. It does appear that things decay with time. Although I think there are probably ways to reduce aging and turn back time. And there are probably ways to manipulate our energy, our life force, and that society is really set up to reduce our lifespan for some reason. But that's a whole nother argument, all right? The thing is that our perception of what this clock does changes. Our consciousness or our perception does not experience time the same way that our body does. That clock can appear to slow down or speed up. Time tends to slow down when we are bored. Time can appear to slow when we reach a state of full presence, when we're like so present and we're aware of everything going on in our environment, all the little subtle things happening at once, and we're not just glazing over the minutia of life. It does appear that time can slow down then. Time speeds up when we are excited, when we are stimulated, when we are fully involved in something, when we are in the flow state. Time can speed up when we are anxious, when our mind speeds up. The time on the clock does not line up with our actual perception of time. Other examples, when we are procrastinating, sometimes we feel like we are like behind the curve in life and things start to pile up. But when we are on top of things and get them done when we need to get them done, we feel like we are ahead of the curve. Another thing I've been thinking about, when I go to write something, I feel like my hand cannot catch up to my mind. And that's because thoughts happen simultaneously, they happen so fast, but writing forces them into linear time. It's a slower way of getting our thoughts out, but in reality, more thoughts happen simultaneously that don't get explained. That's essentially, I think, what we're doing when we force ourselves into following the clock. Our mind is already beyond linear time. And now we got to talk about consciousness. Consciousness, it's not locked inside of our head. Consciousness is non local, it exists everywhere in the universe. I mean, just look at the near death experience stories. It's some crazy shit that people talk about when they almost die, their consciousness leaves their body, and they experience, another dimension. I believe we can do that without having to nearly die. And when people go into those states, they talk about how they feel like it happened in an instant, but really they were dead for like 3 days. So again, the mismatch of time based on who's observing it or what dimension you're on. And also dreams. What the heck are dreams? When we are dreaming, our consciousness leaves our body and travels around. When we are dreaming, we are living in higher dimensions, I believe. All things can happen in an instant. Dreams shift very, very fast. Like things are happening simultaneously. Things do not happen linearly. When we are dreaming, we are transcending time. Now, what's crazy is that you got to remember that our brain is always reconstructing the reality that we see. We don't actually see reality for what it truly is. We're always filtering things into it. We're always creating meaning to it at a subconscious level. And so we're always bringing the scars of the past or the seeds of the future or the worries of the future, the hopes of the future into the present moment. And that is essentially how the past, the present, and the future all exist simultaneously. We know that something bad can happen early on in the day, and then we are carrying it on and it's ruining, it's seeping into the rest of the day. Or something that we're worrying about later is affecting us now before it happens. But I think when we stay fully present, when we learn how to enter a state of transcendental presence, then we let go of being affected by the past and the future. And in fact, the Hopi tribe, which reside in Arizona, I live in Arizona, so I've been learning a lot about them. The Hopi view reality as the past and the future are not separate. The Hopi act like it's happening all at once. They have two ways to describe reality. Either it's manifest or it's objective, which they can actually see it in reality or feel it with their senses, or it's unmanifest or it's subjective. So it hasn't come into physical reality yet. It exists in the mind or the heart, but it's still there. The unmanifest is already present. It exists in energetical form that we can't see. So their language of the here and now, the present moment, it includes both those things. And they see it all as a whole, which I think that's why they can predict things. That's why they have prophecies and all that. So the Hopi are living from a higher conscious perspective. But we are living, most of us are stuck in time loops. We are just repeating the same shit over and over again. And although linear time is increasing, although the clock is ticking, we're not evolving. We're still in the same place. So time for us is a loop when really it should be a spiral, right? Nature has loops, it looks like. Nature has seasons, but it is evolving. It's never really staying the same. And a lot of things in society, I think, are thrown at us to keep us stuck in a loop, in a literal time loop. I think this shit gets deeper than we could ever know or ever even consider. I think the thing that will allow us to free ourselves from time, the thing that will allow us to essentially manipulate the past and therefore influence our future, is to transcend karma. I'm sure you've heard people say that to get out of the reincarnation cycle or trap that the earth is, you have to transcend or balance your karma. And I don't know if that's actually true. That's just an example. So you're no longer trapped replaying old wounds and past experiences and old timelines. You break out of that, you heal yourself, you rewire yourself, you make peace with your past, and maybe you start to see your past as helpful and you start to gain benefit from it instead of regretting it, running from it, trying to push it down. And you become a sovereign being where you can actually start to evolve in the way that you want. I'm not going to get into actually how to transcend your karma, but that's something to think about. Maybe it's a video for the future. So now let's get into the dimensions. It's important to know that we essentially exist in the third dimension. Actually, let me rephrase that. Like parts of us exist in different dimensions. The point is that we are living in multiple dimensions simultaneously all the time. The key is to just be aware of what's going on. Our bodies are three-dimensional objects. Then some physicists like Einstein started to throw in time as the fourth dimension. But let's start from the beginning. Zero dimension is a dot. It's like unity, pure unity. The first dimension is length, just a line. The second dimension is a flat shape. It has length and width. The third dimension, you add height, so you have length, width, and height. So the shape that represents the third dimension is a cube. When you get to the fourth dimension, it becomes a cube within a cube. That's called a tesseract. It's length, width, and height plus time, which is really length, width, and height plus the mind, because without a mind or without consciousness, you couldn't perceive time at all. So we know time shifts depending on how we're observing it. Now, in the fourth dimension, like we said with Einstein's theory of the block universe, it's like our mind is essentially bound to linear cause and effect. We have the illusion of control, but really the future's already determined, right? That's when you add in the fifth dimension. So it's a cube within a cube within a cube, or a pentaract. The fifth dimension is where we start to get into consciousness, not just the mind, but consciousness or higher consciousness. So we're going to talk about timelines in a minute, but if you had awareness in the fifth dimension, you could see all possible timelines simultaneously. And inherently, you could surf or go along whichever timeline you want. Living from a five-dimensional perspective, we will have more freedom to see the future and make decisions that will lead to the outcomes we desire. As we become more conscious, we get more on top of reality. And again, that is assuming some degree of free will, which I do believe that we have the ability to shape the future. But if we are trapped in lower consciousness states, like negativity, fear, like ignorance or closed mindedness, if we are stuck in depression, then we have less freedom and we are essentially chained to pretty boring and unfulfilling timelines that society has planned for us. We become sovereign when we know that we have the freedom of choice. We have the ability to make different decisions in the present moment that will allow us to create our lives. Animals are not operating in the fifth dimension. They're not making decisions from a set of imagined alternatives, possible outcomes. So in the fifth dimension, psychic phenomena like telepathy, telekinesis, remote viewing would become possible. What do you know? We already know that they're possible. If you're watching my channel, you already know that that shit's possible. Just a very simple example, but my body is here in Arizona, but I can project my consciousness to the beach in North Carolina. Who's to say I'm not traveling there? I can project my mind into the past or into the future. Who's to say I'm not actually existing there? So in the fifth dimension, in so many words, you become aware of being aware. So now we got to talk about timelines. And again, this is a snapshot from the book Getting There Without Drugs by Burl Payne. I'm actually almost finished with the book. It's really the first book that I'm going to actually finish from front to back in a while. So from our basic awareness, we only see a cross section of reality. We don't see the actual timeline. So imagine the office chair that I'm sitting on. I'm not aware of the trajectory or the journey from its inception, created in the factory, to its ultimate end, which will probably be in a junkyard somewhere. But each event in our everyday existence, no matter how big or how small, has multiple possible timelines that branch from it. It has a timeline it came from, and I do believe that we have free will. I believe more on the quantum mechanics aspect of things, that we have the ability to influence the future, but in any given moment, those future timelines are shifting a little bit. Every event splits into multiple possible futures. That's why it looks like a branch in this graph. And so we can use our awareness or our consciousness to choose which branch we step into. Nothing is essentially real to us unless we can imagine it or perceive it as existing. So the way to gain more of the ability to create our reality is to really just perceive all the possible timelines. When we make big identity shifts or when we make big life changes, that is us jumping timelines. And this is a way that we can essentially get to our goals faster and really speed up time through our decisions, but we can't force it. And so the shift to a 5D perspective, expanded awareness, it's the freedom to choose timelines and consciously create reality, but we must find the 0 point. We must find mental stillness. We must find pure being and pure existing in the now. We must surrender, essentially thinking about the past or the future, stay balanced in the now. So it is counterintuitive. We can set our intentions, but we can use our intuition to let the future pull us into new timelines or the most natural timeline, most effortless timeline, instead of pushing and trying to control things. We're not obsessing over what if futures, what if this happens. We're not if tripping, but we're remaining open to all possibilities. From a fourth dimensional perspective, we have limited choice. We are reactive instead of responding to life how we want to respond. And we're trapped in timelines that society has set up for us. So the more conscious you are, the more timelines you can perceive and navigate. And this exercise from the book is going to help you do that. And I'm just going to read it. Try to get a strong sense of the here and now as a prerequisite for the next couple exercises. Try to get a feeling of being all together at one point on your 4-dimensional world line, then stretch your awareness to encompass a 5-dimensional view. Sit quietly for a minute and try to get a sense of yourself sitting. Then try to be aware of all the activities or things that are happening in, through, and around you. Extend your awareness into the past as far as you can for each event. How old is that music you hear? Where did it come from? How did it enter your life? What about that picture on the wall? What were its origins? How long has it been there? What about the tree that helped make this book possible? Where did it come from? Then turn your attention to what is possible for each thing or happening, to the unmanifest potential of each one. How much can you perceive? How much can you imagine? Can you get a sense of the many realities in which you exist and how much freedom of movement you actually have? It's a little bit like being on a high mountain peak. You can go down off the peak in many different directions. The higher the peak, the more clearly you can see the terrain around you and the more potential for movement that you have. That is the power of living in the 5th dimension and essentially transcending time. And speaking of music, I think music is time travel. Music is the very closest thing to a time machine. Don't know who made this quote, but it's a damn good quote. Me and my girlfriend were on the way back from a road trip, and she was playing all these songs from like the early mid 2000s. And I swear, I felt myself being teleported back however many years ago when I was hearing that song consistently. I could remember where I was in my house, in my bedroom when I was listening to it. And so I don't really know how we can use music to time travel consistently, but I think it's a clue. And really, you can get into sound frequency and magnetic fields as ways to actually start to time travel. And you know what I find super interesting is that we can still see light. We can see the afterglow from the Big Bang. It is still out there in space. All the light that has ever existed in the entire universe is still there. Maybe traveling through that light or jumping through light in certain time periods is how you time travel. I don't know. Other forms of time travel. You got the flow state. Time disappears. The graphic on the left explains transcendental meditation. Doing transcendental meditation allows you to step into timeless awareness, the pure here and now, the source of everything. So you got to know by now that our consciousness can time travel. Will we get to a point where our bodies can time travel? I think that's where we got to get into like frequency and vibration a little bit more, but I don't know. Is teleportation real? I am an idealist. I believe in the power of ourselves and our humanity. And yeah, I think it is real. And I think if we continue to observe ourselves, observe what's going on, the very simple things that are going on in our head, that are going on out there in reality, observe what nature is doing, we're going to start to get the answers to these things. And I just want to end with my favorite art piece here, The Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali. And hopefully after this presentation, you're going to start expanding your awareness beyond the linear and realize that the past can be healed, the future can be shaped, and the present is the gateway to all timelines. So let me know what you think. Go ahead and watch my other videos after this if you thought this one was interesting. This is probably my deepest video yet, and it took damn long to put together. So give me some love. Give me a like. Give me a subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any feedback or anything to add. That's all I got. Peace.